from Disney Channel's My Super Short Show? Okay, so it's a known fact that every girl, one time or another, dreams of what it would be like to live like royalty. So I'm inviting you to join me as I learn to live, look, and act like a princess. Pink, sequins, grr. Okay, I totally can't decide. I know, let's go visit my friend, Isaac Mizrahi. Come on. Isaac is a totally cool designer, born right here in New York. He went to Parsons School of Design, and he designs awesome costumes for movies, theater, dance, and even opera. What is a princess? What does it mean to you to be a princess?
It's really your inner beauty that makes you a princess. It's really who you are. If you notice, like on Cinderella, she seems very, very at home in her own skin. Yeah, she's really, really happy. Whether she's in like tatters, which she is most of the movie, she's in, you know, these tatty old things.
She's still beautiful.
She's still really beautiful because she
shows
radiates.
through.
That's right, that's right. It's inner beauty.
But
that said, let's talk about clothes.
I've seen there's a few things in here.
Oh, costume jewelry.
Costume jewelry.
No, no, no.
No?
No, princesses only wear rocks. Big, important stones.
But for the less fortunate, let's see, what is there?
Let's see what we have.
Like what colors do you think would go best?
Well, that's a good question because everything starts with colors. Everything starts with. What's
design,
your favorite color?
Texture. I like green. I like
green. How interesting.
I know. Well, it's my birthstone. Let's see what we have in here.
And here we have this tiara, which is kind of cute. Let's try this on. Actually, you know, it's cute, but it kind of looks like that looks more like Swan Lake than Cinderella. Yeah.
Right?
It also looks like a child's ballet costume.
And I'm not a child.
No, you're not a child. How old are you now?
11.
You're not supposed to tell if you're a princess. Princesses never tell their age. Never.
Would
Remember
never
that.
tell a thing like that.
Let's see this. What's this? Here's something good. Check this out.
Oh.
This is nice, actually. Look, it's just a plain little tiara. Look, you see that? It's instant princess. And I have to tell you that what I notice about real princesses usually is they underplay things. Even in Cinderella, she's so simple, she's so beautiful. Her hair is up, she's wearing this big pink and white dress, barely wearing a tiara, no makeup if you notice. She has perfect skin.
Clean.
Clean, exactly. Very, very, very clean.
Okay, so we've talked about princesses wearing things like tiaras. What about dresses?
I love dresses. I live for dresses.
You know, there's some back here. You want to take a look?
Yeah, let's go see.
Let's go. Look at these.
Look at those dresses. Where did those come from? They're gorgeous.
I know. Okay, so where do we start? I mean,
oh, it's like vintage clothes, right?
Yeah.
It's a cute
I mean, what
one.
about this? This is like an Indian,
That's
Arabian
gorgeous.
belly dancer
yes, or
princess.
an Indian princess. Oh, here's what. Now, you said green.
I like green. I don't know, green?
This. This is the one and only dress.
The one and only? But it's so much fun to try on everything else.
This is the one and only dress.
Right.
You have to try that on. Okay, that's the only dress.
Next, let's find out how to design the perfect princess room. All right, to get some ideas, some motivation, some inspiration on how to design the perfect princess room, I'm not gonna mess around. I'm going straight to the top. I am going to meet with the team from ABC's TV series, Extreme Make.
Hey, what do you think of like a color change?
Hi guys,
Right over
what's up?
Yeah. Hi, Sally.
Sally, how are you?
What's going on?
We understand you're looking for a few design experts.
Yeah, something about a happily ever after room?
Yeah, you know, we wanted to learn how to transform an ordinary room like this into a beautiful princess room.
Well, we have got a few ideas.
Yeah.
See, I told you I don't mess around. Straight to the top. Get this. Paul started fixing up houses when he was only 5 years old with his dad. Cool, huh? He's built sets, and he's a master carpenter. So what's a good princess concept for a room?
Well, we'd certainly want a nice princess bed. We want that to be the highlight of the room when you come in, because we're in a bedroom, right?
Okay.
So we want a really nice princess bed. So we would take this bed here and we'd raise it up some, all right?
On
Put
a
it
platform?
On a platform.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And since we have this cutout right here, yep. Michael will pick out a nice color to paint it, and then we'll change these with maybe
Diamonds.
diamonds. Something and just some little
Like
jewels.
jewels.
And we'll glue them on
You
here.
play them around and
Yeah.
and it turns into a princess drawer.
And then we'll really want to richen the room. And how we can do that is by adding molding. And anybody can add molding. It's real simple. A nice rich baseboard.
Okay.
And a chair rail.
Wait, what's a chair rail?
A chair rail protects the wall from the chairs hitting it.
Okay,
So it's a molding that goes all the way around the room. What do you think?
it sounds good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So let's go talk to Michael about color and material and that kind of stuff.
Cool, you're the best. Check this out. Michael has worked in fashion for 10 years. That's almost my entire life. He's totally an expert at blending new stuff with not so perfect pieces. Hey, Michael.
Hey, what's up?
I'm here to talk about colors.
All right, hey, have a seat. I've got some big plans for princess colors.
Okay, what kind of princess colors?
One color comes to mind, very, very important, and
Okay.
that's pink. You like it?
Yeah, I like
All right, so I picked this one here, which is called the Fairy of
yeah.
them all.
It's fairest of them all.
Right, fairest of them all. And then it's all about contrast, okay? So
Right.
the other color I'm thinking is this one right here, this blibbity blue. And we're gonna use...
Bibbidi bobbidi blue.
Oh yeah, you're good. So here's the thing, it's all about contrast. So where there's pink, there's blue, and when there's blue,
There's
gonna...
pink.
Very good.
Ah, gotcha.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna divide the room almost in half. We'll paint the top half blue.
Okay, so it's kind of like princessy. You got the sky in your room.
There you go, a couple of stars twinkling up
Right.
there. And then we'll do the bottom in the pink, but we're gonna divide it with the chair rail.
Divided by the chair
And
rail.
we're gonna paint that chair rail white. So there'll be a nice, crisp, clean definition between our colors.
Now, what about the fabrics?
Ah, yes. Okay, well, what I'm thinking is we need something very regal and royal. So I'm
Royal.
thinking we go with shears. You like it?
Shears. What are shears?
Shears are things that you can see through and it lets the light through. But we'll continue
Okay.
with the whole contrast thing. So where we have white shears, we'll put pink over.
Okay.
Now, the next thing we need to think about is the bed.
Okay.
All right, now Paul's gonna put the bed in that little niche over there.
Okay.
And what I'll do is I'll go buy a new bedspread.
Now, what color are you gonna make
Well, I'll
it?
probably go with blue because the bottom half of the wall is pink.
Oh, and that'll make it contrast.
Exactly, and then to really pop the contrast, I'll go buy all different pillows and pinks and blues and whites, and they'll all pull the whole room together.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. So now what you need to do is find Constance, and she can help you with the stenciling and all the pretty things that finish off the room.
Okay.
Awesome. Let's get to work.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
You bet. Bibbidi bobbidi blue.
Did you know that Constance went to Kansas State University and studied architecture? She's been a designer for 15 years, and she's the queen of building and planning. Hey, so I think I came over here to learn about stenciling.
Absolutely, Sally. Take a look at this. This is an idea board, and I was looking for princess shapes
Okay.
and ideas for good stencils, and I think I found one right here, a nice little crown. And I think that would make a really cool stencil.
Okay.
Stenciling is so easy. You know why?
Why?
Anybody can do it because you get a guide. You either get a template or a
Okay.
stamp.
All
Now,
right.
when you do a template, that means it's a flat piece of paper or plastic that you paint through. When you do a stamp, that's just like what you know. A stamp is something you stamp on the wall. If you had a stamp from the store that was shaped like this, like a butterfly or a heart, you could stamp that right on the wall, or you can make your own stamp out of lots of things, like a kitchen sponge. You can even cut up a potato and make a stamp out of it.
You know, what do you think? I
I
got
will-
my tiara. Do I have it?
I think you got it, girl, that's it. So your stencils go right against the wall like that, you paint on top, and you carefully pull it away. You know what would look really good in here, Sally, is a crown. I mean, right here, if you did a big crown in those colors that Michael talked about, and then like Paul talked about, maybe put those jewels in the crown just like that. And you know that chair rail that Paul's talking about right here? You could just stencil crowns underneath the chair rail. It'd be perfect.
Okay.
We got hardwood floors, which is good.
Just sort of raise it up.
Right. Too
Too
high.
high. Yeah.
So I've learned about color, fabric, and stenciling. And I've learned a lot from Constance, Paul, and Michael. Now, here's the moment we've all been waiting for. Let's see how the before room has been transformed by the Extreme Makeover team into the happily ever after princess room. Wow!
What do you think?
This is the perfect princess room. Thank you guys so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
I mean, this is amazing.
We had so much fun doing this.
Oh yeah, we had to dig deep inside to find our inner princess and tap it. Well, you know, Paul really tapped into his inner princess to make this room happen.
It took me a little while, but I finally got there.
Found it.
I mean, this is awesome. Can you go over some of the changes you made so we can see it before and after?
Sure, you see how you had to jump up there on the bed, right?
Right.
We raised the bed up so it's a little bit higher, right? It showcased it a little bit more. Put it back here in the little cubby hole, right?
Right.
Talked about our chair rail, right? Here's our chair rail, protects our walls. It gives Michael his contrast that he wanted. Our diamond knobs. Now, we actually used real diamonds this time. No, they're just glass knobs. A couple little jewels on each side. Look what we found under the carpet. Hardwood floors.
Hardwood floors.
So then we let Connie go at it with the stenciling thing.
Yeah, that stenciling thing. Remember we talked about?
Right.
That big crown we were going to do? Well, take a look at this. Look how simple that
Wow,
was to
look
do.
at that.
And you can just add those really great jewels and pearls to make it really special. And you don't have to just stencil on a wall like that. You can stencil on furniture. You can take a very plain dresser and make it something really special by adding this stencil design to every single drawer. And then remember, we were talking about stenciling on the wall. So easy to do. Anybody can do it. Take a stamp and just stamp it all over the wall, right below the chair rail, and it makes it really special. And you can use those contrasting colors like Michael was talking about.
Absolutely. Remember our colors? Bibbidi Bobbidi Blue and Fairest of them all pink. They
Right?
look great together, don't they? And we've got contrast. We've got contrast over here. Remember the curtains? You asked me about the fabrics? We've got our sheer fabric, so you can still see through it. It's very royal. We've got the pink on the outside, the white right behind that. Remember I told you I was going to do some shopping? I got this bedspread right here.
All
It says
right.
Princess right on it. Gotta like that. And it's blue, so it contrasts off the pink. And all of these wonderful different colored pillows to pull all of our colors in. But the crowning jewel, right here, the canopy. How do you like it?
It looks wonderful.
So now all this room needs is
A princess.
Princess? Now look, I'm here in Malibu, California to meet a real life princess, Catherine Oxenberg, to get a few tips how to act like a princess. Princess Catherine was born in New York and she grew up in London. She's the daughter of Princess Elizabeth of Yugoslavia. And she was named after Catherine the Great. Great. What's the best thing about being a princess?
The biggest advantage to being a princess is that you get to meet some pretty cool people and you get to go to some pretty cool places. And I have been to lots of different castles and different palaces, and I've got to have met lots of different kings and queens from different countries.
That's awesome.
It is pretty cool.
So, what is proper princess etiquette, if
Okay.
that makes sense?
It makes perfect sense. Having good manners. People respond magically to people with good manners. If you just smile at people going down the street, it makes a huge difference. It really does.
It's the first impression, too.
Exactly. And how do, you know, when you're able to touch somebody's heart, then you have really discovered the essence of being a princess. Appreciating people and saying thank you.
About thank you, please and thank you.
Yes, that please and thank you really are the magic words.
Right. What are some of your hobbies?
I like hiking, I love nature, and I love doing yoga.
What is a tiara?
Okay, a tiara is a headpiece, not as formal as a crown. So a crown would be worn by a queen and a tiara would be more for a princess.
Who is this?
That is my mother's mother. That's my grandmother, and her name was Olga. And those are all real diamonds. And she used to say it used to give her a terrible, terrible headache to wear these crowns. Each one of these is humongous. And that crown might have weighed, I don't know, between at least 10, maybe 15 pounds.
Wow.
No, that's impossible.
So, you know, I see people doing the wave. How do you do the wave?
Well, I think I've seen you do that wave. Actually, you were showing me how to do the wave. How are you doing the Queen's wave? Like,
I cupped
you cup
my
your hand?
wrist.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Miss USA, though. I think I'll stick to this
Yeah,
one.
let's be the more natural wavers. So first, pretend you're wearing a dress.
Okay, dress.
Okay, so we're lifting up the dress,
All right.
and we are putting one leg behind the other.
Doesn't matter which leg.
Well, it depends. You know, I'm right-handed, so I put my right leg back the same way if I'm water skiing. So your water skiing leg.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready? Okay, and then you bob. Excellent. Now, if you're going to meet a king or a queen, factor in high heels, This knee has to practically go down to the ground.
Okay, so I'm in high heels.
You're in high, we're both in high heels. You're holding their hand.
With the water ski leg in back.
Yes, the water ski leg, the water ski leg is back. And now, right knee almost down to the ground. Okay, and keep your balance and smile. Like, you're not gonna, and now try coming up. Ah! Excellent.
Do not try this at home.
No, it could be very dangerous, almost fatal. Excellent job.
Well, see, I'm gonna show you a few moves of mine.
Okay, I'm ready.
You gotta get out of there, princess. You gotta go. Yo, yo, yo. Wow, well, thanks for everything.
You are so welcome. I had a blast, and thank you for my hip hop lesson. I'm practicing. Can I hug you? Goodbye.
Sure. Wow, what a great experience. Thanks to Isaac, the Extreme Makeover Home Edition team, and Princess Oxenberg, I now have learned to look, live, and act like a real-life princess.
Cinderella goes back a long ways at the studio. Their scripts going back to the 1930s.
When they finally decided to do Cinderella in 1948, it was at a time when they weren't really sure what was going to happen to the studio financially.
The word believing is all the way through this movie. And usually, if Walt believed hard enough, it worked for him.
I think that he was rolling the dice and praying. I think he did a lot of that.
It was very typical of Walt to go out on a limb and take a risk. And in some ways, you know, this was the biggest risk he took.
Walt had not had a big financial success since Snow White. Snow White, that was it. By the end of the Second World War, he was $4 million in debt.
If Cinderella had lost money, I think that would have been the end of Disney animation, or at least the end of Disney feature animation, because although Snow White had been such a huge hit, Pinocchio and Fantasia had both lost money the first time out.
It's true. The studio went through very hard times, particularly during the war years. In fact, they were kept afloat by training films for the United States government. And the South American films that they made for the Good Neighbor policy of Roosevelt. So Walt and Roy decided that the way they could save the company would be through diversification. So they started to do live action films. They started to put together short cartoons into a feature format. That's why you see films like Make Mine Music and Melody Time.
And they did okay, but they weren't really big hits, and they didn't really establish Disney storytelling as he had done.
They made back their costs anyway, but you can't keep a business very long. It was a question of survival. And let's make a feature, or let's sell the business.
Walt remarked, we need a story with a girl in trouble. That usually works. You know, Snow White just worked.
Everybody loves a story of an underdog. We love a story where you are rooting for this girl to rise up above the oppression.
Well, believe it or not, I think that Walt identified with that. Walt was from a humble background. He had big dreams, big hopes, but he had nothing to start with except his imagination. And with his imagination, he built an empire. He built a world.
Walt had a pretty tough childhood. He had worked on a farm. He had delivered newspapers when it was 25 degrees below. And yet he believed in the Hollywood dream, the American dream. He felt that he had achieved that dream himself, and that he somehow had this power to give it to people.
And here, encapsulated with this one little poor, pathetic little girl who's been put upon, and she has nothing, some wonderful things happen to her.
I think part of the reason Walt Disney had to have been attracted to Cinderella, and some of the reason that I'm attracted to Cinderella, is because I'm a Cinderella story. I started off as a poor kid, and here I am. Walt started off as a poor kid, and he became Walt Disney.
I think at the heart of all of the classic Disney films is transformation. That's what we're animating. We're animating those moments. For Pinocchio to become a real boy, for Cinderella to imagine herself as chosen by the prince and dressed in this beautiful gown.
The transformation scene of Cinderella in rags into Cinderella in that beautiful ball gown, Walt Disney said was his favorite piece of animation.
I must say I've always felt very good about it. I don't think it's the best piece of animation ever done, but it was something that hit the heart and it struck Walt.
Which, of course, comes from a man who loved the idea of transformation in life into something better, bigger, grander, more beautiful.
We all have dreams like that. I think that's one major reason this story has been told for 900 years.
There are 90,000 variations of the Cinderella story, and Walt Disney knew the power of it. It has all the great elements. Every girl wants to meet a prince. Every prince wants to meet a beautiful girl.
It's a story that everybody knows. But Walt took that story and made so much more of it. One, he took the basic story and created these wonderful scenes that make that story so much more effective and cinematic. I mean, take, for example, the scene where the two ugly sisters tear the ball gown of Cinderella. I mean, that is quite a dramatic scene. And that's a very, very effective way of getting that story over. But he then set up this parallel story with the animals.
Walt and his crew came up with this wonderful subplot, the mice and the cat.
And the only thing holding these two stories together is Cinderella herself. But Walt set them up in this marvelous counterpoint.
It's one of those classic films that you can hang entertainment on, because the story is so bare bones in a way. You know, it's good and evil, and it's, you know, triumphing, you know, at the end. But on that framework, they're able to hang so many wonderful, entertaining bits and bring out such interesting personalities.
All those wonderful things that happen, the shoe breaking, is the Disney version. It's a very, very good story. Very, very well told.
And for 3 generations of Americans, a Cinderella story means Walt Disney's telling of the story, because it's told so well.
Thank you.
Had Cinderella flopped, there wouldn't be any Walt Disney animation afterwards. And luckily, it was a huge hit. It was almost its own story from rags to riches.
I met Walt Disney just a year after he'd made Cinderella. And he invited me to come to his studio. And one by one, I met all of these, what they call the 9 old men.
The 9 old men, Walt's tour de force group of artists, all worked together on Cinderella. These were men at the top of the game.
They were the people who really saved Disney animation after World War II. There had been some wonderful animators before them who had contributed a tremendous amount to the creation of the Disney animation style, but they were the key figures in keeping the Disney animation style going from 1945 really up into the 60s.
They were so excited with the glory of what they had wrought. And they told all these stories about the making of Cinderella.
Walt Disney really knew what the strong sides were in the animators, and he cast them accordingly. The casting on Cinderella was really perfect.
Eric Larson and Mark Davis were equally skilled as draftsmen, and they were assigned the difficult task of animating Cinderella.
There are certain scenes in the film that when I think of the scene, I think of the person who animated them. When Cinderella wakes up in the morning, it's so much like Eric. Eric was our mentor when we started at Disney, and he was
a grandfatherly guy with a nice portly belly, and he would talk like this, and he was always sincere and very genuine and heartfelt.
And when you see that scene, you just feel everything is right in the world. And I feel like I felt back at Disney in the room next to Eric Larson when I'd go in and work with him.
I remember Eric Larson talking about the fact that he and Mark Davis, they didn't quite see eye to eye in terms of Cinderella.
All right, breakfast is served.
Mark Davis apparently gave her a more sophisticated quality, whereas Eric Larson went for a simpler character, and they had to somehow reconcile the two sides of the character. But I think that's what makes her interesting too, that she does have this down-home warmth to her. But there's also a certain intelligence and sharpness about her.
Maybe I should interrupt the music lesson.
And I think it has something to do with Mark Davis's approach to the character.
This is sort of a doodle sheet that Mark Davis did during the making of Cinderella, and you can see this is probably early on where he's analyzing her face.
So So this is love.
Milt Kahl, who was the top draftsman at the studio, was always stuck with the princes. Very difficult to do these straight masculine characters without making them look silly. Milt Kahl also had scenes with the Duke and the King.
It's high time he married and settled down. Of course, Your Majesty.
Milt Kahl did these drawings of the king. Milt was always a master at hands. They were always so correct and very, very expressive.
Milt did the fairy godmother. That scene with the fairy godmother is unforgettable.
Good heavens, child. You can't go in that.
The fairy godmother has surprising warmth. There's this grandmotherly type, you know, who has a lot of softness. There's a lot of nice feeling to that character.
Everyone's talking about it. The whole kingdom.
Frank Thomas did the villain in Cinderella. The most hated villain of all the Disney villains.
Frank Thomas had done Bambi, he'd done the Seven Dwarfs, he did Pinocchio. All these wonderful, charming characters. And he said, I was amazed when Walt put me on to Lady Tremaine. But he said he must have seen something in my way of thinking that would work for this character.
Frank Thomas was anything but a wicked stepmother, but there was something always going on in his head. You'd go into his office and he would be searching for ways to communicate to you what he was trying to put into the scene. There was always some depth to the character he was trying to get.
Well, don't just stand there.
I think that Frank, the way he did the stepmother was absolutely the right way to do it. He worried some about it being too straight, but I think she had to be the way she was, because I think she's very frightening when she looks at you.
Ollie Johnston, Frank's best friend forever and ever, and his partner and collaborator in so many films, Ollie did the Wicked Stepsisters, who were so slovenly, so lazy, so ugly, so unappealing, that by contrast, Cinderella would look lovelier and lovelier.
Ollie Johnston didn't feel he was the best draftsman like, say, Milt Kahl was or Mark, and he couldn't analyze the scenes as much as, say, Frank did. But Ollie was very emotional. He just really worked from his heart.
Mother, do you realize what you just said?
Of course. I said, if.
The stepsisters were the broadest characters that I had done up to that point, certainly. Oh, a lot of scenes where I even went too broad. I remember one where Anastasia, she was smiling, you know, like that, silly smile. So I went real broad with that, thinking I'm going to get something really funny out of this. But finally Walt called me in. He says, you know, she is a little bit ugly. I suppose you could fix that up.
Wolfgang Reitherman, born in Germany, came over here as a little kid. What Walt liked about him was his attitude. Wooly was a great suspense guy, and he thought a great idea for a scene is get that key up to Cinderella through that dizzying stairs setup that they had laid out.
I think that's one of the best sequences of suspense that we've ever had in a picture.
And it keeps building and building because we keep cutting back and forth. You know, the cat comes in the way, he's trying to stop them. It's like a Hitchcock film. It's unbelievable.
Ward Kimball probably had the most fun of anybody on Cinderella. He got the cat, Lucifer.
That was perfect casting because you could have never cast Ward Kimball on Cinderella. He would have fallen apart. He would not have enjoyed himself.
I didn't have to work making those very careful drawings of Cinderella and some of the other animators had to work on. And it was pure comedy, the old cat-mouse relationship. And my problem was to develop a cat that looked mean.
He had some funny stories about looking for a cat to be a personality like Lucifer, because they had mean cats and they had slinky cats and they had all different kind of cats drawn in the story sketches.
Walt came out to the house here one day, and our six-toed cat we call Feetsy was rubbing up against Walt's leg. And he said, "For gosh sakes, Kimball, there's your cat." What are you worried about? And that's what led to my conception of the cat.
At the time, he and I were playing in our Dixieland band, the Firehouse 5+2, and they'd always introduce Ward as the one who had done the mice in the Cinderella, and everyone go, "Ooh!" Then St. Frank there did the stepmother. Ugh. I said, "We got to get another picture here, Ward. I can't take any more of this."
Walt Kimball got to do what he's best at, not staying within the forms of realism, but breaking out of that.
This great quality of going from real to unreal, that's always in Kimball's work. He was a fantastic, unique animator. You can look at his stuff on the screen and know it's Ward Kimball.
Walt's masterpiece, of all his work he's done at Disney, probably is the sequence where the cat is confused by which cup is hiding one of the mice. That is such a crazy but spontaneous sequence. It's as good as anything Chaplin has ever done. There are these two animation styles almost going on in the movie, when you have something like the cat and the mice, and then you have Cinderella and the stepmother, who are very real and have all these subtleties.
It's very difficult to animate human figures and to mix them with animals. It's just difficult. And Cinderella really succeeds well in that area.
You mean old thing?
You only got that by men who had grown from doing Snow White through Pinocchio, through Bambi, Fantasia, and finally were able to do Cinderella.
The financial condition of the studio was such that they couldn't pour the lavishness into the production that they had on Fantasia or Pinocchio. So what they did was they shot the entire film in live action, and they used this as a guide to do layouts for the film, for the cutting, for the way the action would flow into one another.
They'd shoot live action and they'd blow it up to animation-sized paper, and then they'd put a sheet of animation paper on and draw right over it.
Some of the animators kind of, balked at that a little bit. They just like, I can do this, I don't need it.
If the live action was good, well, I used it, and if it wasn't, I didn't use it. And then I'd use the best parts of it, and I'd use it to help me enhance something, But I still didn't like to use it.
It is arguable that this is a less creative way of doing things. But the Disney artists were not the sort of artists who would just mindlessly trace over the live action.
They knew it had to be filtered through an artist's mind. And they had opinions on things, how something should move, and when it wasn't moving right in the live action, they would change it, and that's why it turned out so good, because they had a very critical eye.
If you look at some of the photographs that were taken and then the photostats that were made of it, and then you look at the final animation, you can see that there's an enhancement that the animators brought to it. The animators knew that you have to go further in animation than you do in live action, otherwise it's going to look stilted. Look at Frank Thomas's evil stepmother. There's a look about her that reminds you of actress Eleanor Audley, but he certainly goes further in her poses and in the way that she gestures and the way that she puts her points across on screen.
And one more thing. See that Lucifer gets his bath.
Ward Kimball had the luckiest role because the rest of us were sweating under all these restrictions of the live action we'd shot. They didn't shoot live action for him, and he wouldn't have followed it in the first place.
I was always looking forward to the next scene because it was fun.
It took us around 2 years to do it with all the experimental work in story and shooting the live action and that. But once we started animating it, it went quite fast. And we probably did the whole thing in 6 months. We all knew that it was a good picture because you could see it from the time we were shooting the live action on it. If Walt had been right in his vision of what the audience wanted, well, we'd be in business, and he was right. They just loved the picture.
Walt Disney wanted to do something that had the feel of a Snow White, but new, different, or more magical.
Oh, this is love.
The music in Cinderella is really key to the way the story is told in the film.
in keeping with Disney wanting to have an integrated piece of entertainment, the plot doesn't stop just for a song. It actually, you know, is integrated into the story itself.
Yes, I know it's a lovely morning, but it was a lovely dream, too.
Walt Disney was very serious about how he used music, just as serious as he was with the animation that he and his team created. So we look at Steamboat Willie, the first popular cartoon with synchronized sound, and we see that music is really the main part of the film. Mickey whistles from the very beginning. There's a musical performance that takes up more than half the cartoon. The very next thing that Disney does after several successful Mickey Mouse cartoons is he creates the Silly Symphonies, which is a series of cartoons based around musical performances.
And occasionally, some of those songs would turn out and become hits. But it was always kind of an accident because the songwriter wrote songs for the picture, period.
Wait a minute. Get the idea first. The theme is pigs.
Let's put it in 4/4 time.
All they were thinking about was telling the story perfectly, and a song usually worked.
How about Who's Afraid of the Big Old Wolf? No, it ought to be Big Bad Wolf.
Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? Big bad wolf.
But nobody expected Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf to become a hit, but it did.
Just whistle while you work.
And many of the songs in Snow White became commercial hits. It was freaky. Whistle While You Work and all that.
Pinocchio, of course, had a hit song with When You Wish Upon a Star.
I mean, they had all these wonderful songs that became hit songs, but they were not written for the market. They were written for the picture. And Walt Disney realized that with Cinderella, the whole studio depended on him. He didn't want to take a chance that maybe the public will go for this. He wanted pure songwriters who wrote for the commercial market. And so he realized Tin Pan Alley, the guys that write the hit songs.
Tin Pan Alley refers to the popular music publishing business in the United States. Tin Pan Alley really got started in the late 19th century. Many composers were part of a publishing industry. Tin Pan Alley was centered in downtown New York. It literally refers to 28th Street, where numerous publishers had their offices.
My dad was a songwriter, and he was one of the Tin Pan Alleyites. You know, he was there along with, it was like a big fraternity of writers, and they all conglomerated around. Well, at the time when my father was writing, there was a thing called the Brill Building, and so all the songwriters would gather there and play their songs for the various publishers. He'd say, yes or no, no, we got too many ballads, I don't need a ballad, I need a novelty, something about June or moon or something.
It was a whole different world then. And they would meet you on the street. They knew who I was, and they'd say, you got time, I want you to hear a song. And I would want to do almost every song I heard. They were so good.
But you had to come up with the wrinkle, the special thing to make it a successful song. And it was quite a remarkable world.
The three Tin Pan Alley songwriters that ended up working on Cinderella were Al Hoffman, Mac David, and Jerry Livingston. All had extensive experience working in the publishing industry.
Walt heard this novelty song. I remember it very well from junior high. It was very catchy.
It was called Chobaba Chobaba Chihuahua, a silly little funny thing. It was a gigantic hit.
That caught his ear, and he thought, that's the way I want to go with the musical score.
So he wanted to know who wrote it, and he was told these three guys wrote it. And then he wanted to know where were they. And he listened to some of their other songs. He said he wanted them to try something for Cinderella. So the first thing they came up with was...
That'll work to him. And my brother and I used to go crazy because all he ever said to us was, yeah, that'll work. And we never got wonderful, great, marvelous. It was just Walt's way. But if it would work, you knew it was in his picture.
A Dream is a Wish Your Heart Makes, I loved. That was the very first song I sang in the film. And my daughter, she was old enough to see it by the time it came out. And when Cinderella starts singing to the mice and the birds, if you keep on believing, my little 3-year-old jumped up in the theater and yelled, that's my mummy, that's my mummy. And I know some lady sitting in front of us turned around and said, isn't that sweet? She thinks her mother's Cinderella. It was wonderful. It was fun.
Bippity Boppity Boo was a huge
pop hit. I remember when it was a huge pop hit. And it's a great song. It's just a neat song to sing along.
It has that repetitive type of thing to children that catches their ear. It lasts forever, that song.
It'll do magic, believe it or not. Bibbidi-bobbidi-boo.
They had the work song, which was a big, big hit.
Cinderella, Cinderella, night and day, it's Cinderella, make the fire, fix the breakfast.
So they came up with 3 gigantic hits.
And we'll make a lovely dress for Cinderella.
Besides the 3 Tin Pan Alley songwriters in Cinderella, you also have 3 other very accomplished musicians working on this film. Oliver Wallace, Paul Smith, and Joseph Dubin, all of whom had worked on many, many Disney films before. Their music and Joe Dubin's orchestration really helped establish the rest of the sound for this film. When the mice are trying to get up the steps, or Lucifer is slinking around, or any kind of antics are taking place, the score is really giving us an idea of what this action is.
Nominated for Best Song, nominated for Best Score. So those guys did very well by Disney.
One interesting effect in Cinderella is the overdubbing technique that occurs during the Sing Sweet Nightingale sequence.
Walt Disney came in and listened to the song at the end of the day, and he sat there very quiet for about, I'd say 5 minutes. Everybody thought, he doesn't like it. And he said, I see a soap bubble coming up, and I see Cinderella's face, and I hear another voice, a harmony voice. And then I see another bubble coming up, and I hear another voice singing harmony. He said, we can do it. I know we can do it.
The guitarist and inventor Les Paul had experimented with overdubbing in the mid and late 40s, and so it had just really hit the mainstream.
That technique was new, and he wanted to utilize it as much as he could. So he realized, this is one way I can do it.
That's the way he was. When he said something could be done, nobody questioned him.
Cinderella marked the first time that Disney was actually going to publish the music through their own publishing company. And they started their own publishing company in part because they felt that the songs in Cinderella were going to be such big sellers that they might as well get the benefits of publishing the music themselves.
And that was a very big first. So a lot of wonderful things happened because of that decision.
The music was so infectious. It's something that stays with you for so long. There's not that much music around that's that way.
Clearly their idea that music was going to be a key part of Cinderella paid off, because not only was the soundtrack album a #1 hit, it sold 750,000 copies, but all the components of the sound for Cinderella were nominated for Academy Awards.
I know that the album, the record album, was #1 for a year over a lot of big albums. The Cinderella album sold #1 all over the world.
So this and 3 of the songs became hit parades and everything. It was just a wonderful, successful picture.
I felt so wonderful the night of the Cinderella premiere, and of course Mr. Disney was there, and the animators were there, and everybody that had anything to do with the making of the film, and it was a thrill.
It was a big success, bigger than Snow White. They had clothes, purses, all the merchandise came out too.
When I saw Cinderella and heard it, I thought it was marvelous. Couldn't have been better. It was a great experience. I wouldn't take anything for that. I really wouldn't.
Why, it's like a dream. A wonderful dream come true.
I think it must have been amazing to be Walt Disney and to see that these things you dreamed were suddenly coming true.
It's more than I ever hoped for. Bless you, my child.
I know everybody I've talked to that, and back then that saw the movie, was just so thrilled with it. It's a wonderful, beautiful, happy movie. And I think that it lived up to every bit of the public's expectation.
There's magic. I mean, that old Disney word magic. It's there. It really is.
It made a person believe in dreams and dreams coming true.
It says, give us all the chance, we can all succeed.
Cinderella has been told many, many times, and I think the quintessential telling of it was Walt Disney's telling of it.
There's only one Cinderella.
Hi, my name's Don Hahn, and I'm the producer of Disney's The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast. Having faced the task of adapting a well-known fairy tale for the screen, I know the challenges it represents. Cinderella is one of my favorite Walt Disney films. With characters, animation, and music work together to tell a near-perfect story. But believe it or not, there was a time when Walt Disney considered doing the movie in a very different way. In doing research for this Cinderella DVD, the Disney archivists unearthed a rare treasure. In an envelope that hadn't been opened since 1949, they found photographs of a full set of storyboards for a version of the film that was very, very different from the final film as we know it. Disney's Cinderella seems so effortless and graceful to us that you might not realize that Walt took almost 30 years to bring this beloved fairy tale to the screen. Looking back through the surviving documentation of years worth of treatments, storyboards, we can piece together a look at the Cinderella that almost was. Disney first tackled the Cinderella story in 1922 for his Kansas City animation studio called Laugh-O-Grams. Believe it or not, in its day, this was considered sophisticated animation. With his animation prowess considerably polished, Walt returned to the story in 1933 and planned to produce Cinderella as one of the Silly Symphony series. He sent a story treatment around the studio, along with a request for his artist to submit visual gags for the film.
That was the modus operandi. You could make yourself $5 if you did an acceptable gag. And these guys were knocking themselves out drawing these things.
It says a lot about Disney's talent as a storyteller that some of these earliest gags found their way into the final film.
When we had a meeting on Cinderella, it would be under Walt's supervision. He would add to this or take from it or maybe say, no, this isn't working.
For Walt, it obviously wasn't working in 1933 because the planned Silly Symphony was never made and the idea was set aside.
Sometimes it languished for years. He didn't know what to do next and they didn't, so he put it on the shelf. And then when he got an idea, he'd tell them to take it off and develop the way he suggested.
5 years later, Walt returned to the Cinderella story, this time starting with a draft by Disney writer Al Perkins. Over the next 10 years, Disney went through numerous writers, dozens of drafts, and thousands of storyboards as characters and storylines were developed and then abandoned in the quest for the perfect telling of the world's most famous fairy tale. In the first few years, they spent a lot of time developing the character of Prince Charming. In one version of early storyboards, the prince is introduced as a hunter, chasing a deer over a palace wall, only to reveal that the prince and the deer are friends.
Well, that might give us a chance to get a picture of the prince and not get too close to him. If you sell that idea, you don't have to be dragging him into the story.
But by the time the film went into production, the prince's role had shrunk to almost nothing. There have been many versions of the Cinderella story told throughout history. In most of them, Cinderella is assisted by animals.
Happy birthday!
But in the one we're most familiar with, the Charles Perrault version, Cinderella didn't have any animal friends. In some of the earliest drafts and storyboards, Cinderella had a pet turtle named Clarissa. The fairy godmother turned Clarissa into Cinderella's lady-in-waiting for the ball, and Clarissa fell hopelessly in love with the prince's valet, Spink.
The animals were very important to the story because Cinderella could play off of the animals and show her true feelings.
It was a lovely dream, too.
That's the type of character relationship that Walt loved.
All the little animals in each little group would have personalities. You'd also have some animals close to Cinderella in the house. Mice dressed up in clothes would be funny if we could find a reason for it.
The story team spent a lot of time and experimentation trying to decide if and how the animals would talk.
We might want the mice to talk. It might be very cute in there when they're working that they have little songs that they can sing.
She'd go around in circles till she's very, very dizzy. Still I holler, keep 'em busy, Cinderella.
In 1944, another talking animal was added to the cast. A gossiping crow named Jabber came and went in various drafts over the next few years.
The crow and all the animals can talk when Cinderella isn't around, and we'll tell some of our story through them. The crow can bring the news that the whole town is excited.
The crow could talk, the mice could talk, and the barnyard animals could talk. But in Disney's mind, the birds could only chirp. This led to several sequences in which the birds had to communicate with only pantomime, like when the birds first try to tell the other animals that Cinderella is going to the ball.
They come down chirping, excited, and fly over to the horse. And the dog wants to know what the heck's the matter with them. And the horse, he says, they're trying to tell us something. And the dog says, why don't they learn to talk like we do?
Not being able to speak, the birds have to act it out.
The horse gets it. A ball. The horse says, get it? And the dog, whoosh, picks it up in his mouth. And so then the horse says, put it down, put it down.
In the end, Disney simplified the roles of all the animals, except the mice and the cat.
Walt would look at something somebody had slaved over and then just say, no, it's not working, and dismiss it and start again.
Actually, in story meeting, I found him to be completely reasonable, except when he said no to my ideas.
Walt Disney understood what a story needed, and what's really more important is what a story doesn't need.
Walt and his artists developed things the story didn't need with just as much creativity as they developed the things the story did need. For example, at one point they planned an elaborate montage of invitations to the ball being delivered throughout the town. As you can see, the sequence would have been hilarious. But in the end, Walt decided against it.
We have to pull out a lot of gags that are in just as gags. There's a time when you can gag a thing and times when you have to carry a certain sincere feeling if you want the story to hold.
After she returns home from the ball, some versions of the Cinderella story have her eavesdropping on her stepsisters.
And when they come home, they're talking about this beautiful princess. And Cinderella listens, and she's getting quite a kick out of it because they're talking about her.
But in the end, Walt decided it was more important to keep the story moving forward and not let Cinderella come off as spiteful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for everything.
Another set of storyboards proposed an ending for the film that would have been a little bit longer. After the glass slipper is found to fit, the Duke brings Cinderella to the palace, still dressed in her work rags.
The suspense of that is, what's the prince going to think when he sees her as she is? Well, the payoff has to be one where he doesn't give a darn what she's in. When he sees her, there she is. The godmother comes in at the right time, gives a gesture, and she's the beautiful princess again.
But at the last minute, Walt decided...
Now, we may want to get an ending more satisfying to the audience. They like to see a thing pay off, but not go on too long. The thought is, when the slipper fits, it's the lead-in to a celebration in the town, with all the bells ringing.
As late as 1948, Cinderella's story outlines included 2 musical fantasy sequences that ultimately did not make it into the film. After being told by her stepmother that she can attend the ball if she gets her chores done, Cinderella sings the Cinderella Works Song. Confronted by an enormous workload, she imagines herself multiplying into an army of scullery maids.
There are just 8 of us, how we hate the fate of us. All day long our backs are bent. If we had a wish to wish, we'd be a regiment.
The other unused song of interest was a variation on one of Walt's pet ideas, a concept that he tried to work into several of his films. The heroine and her Prince Charming dancing in the clouds. The beautiful artwork for this Dancing on a Cloud sequence reveals the Disney artists at their finest.
Walt would go over the songs with a fine-tooth comb, and he finally would choose the ones that looked like they worked or advanced the story. That was the main thing.
Despite all the work that went into them, both songs were ultimately replaced. The Cinderella work song kept its title, but became a different song sung most memorably by the mice.
So this is love.
Dancing on a Cloud was replaced by So This Is Love.
So this is love. The pear-shaped toy.
In addition to songs being dropped, there was also a wonderful character developed who did not make it into the final film. The music teacher, Professor Lafouf.
There was a section with a music teacher, and I would have liked to have animated that teacher. I thought it'd be kind of fun to do, particularly if he would get exasperated with these horrible creatures he had to work with.
Professor Lafouf had the unenviable task of trying to... Thinking that the inhuman sounds were coming from the stepsisters, Lafouf would get exasperated.
He goes over, looks at her throat, and then he says, we try again.
Oh, sing sweet.
He can't figure it out. Then he has to break down in some way. But he thinks they're making fun of him. Madame, do you realize who I am? You bring me here to make a jackass of me. What is this? Cock-a-doodle-doo. What is this? Arf, arf. Where am I? In a stable? He puts his hat on and he goes galloping off with a whinny.
He would be adding all the time. He's building on this thing right up till the day that the picture is in the can, he's making changes.
This entire sequence was dropped at the last minute and simplified into the very brief singing lesson we see in the final film.
I guess it would have been extraneous material. Walt was very good at that, you know. He could tell when we got something that's slowing it down, stopping the story. He always played for the entertainment. He had such a strong feeling for entertainment.
Walt, when he focused on story possibilities, he focused on story possibilities. And he was also always looking for the little tear. If you could get people involved with a character, fine. Now get sympathy for the character, good. Now have something bad about to happen to the character. Now you got your audience.
Be careful we don't repeat. Keep moving and always end up with a hope or a despair.
Well, it took a long time to get there, down a winding road dotted with abandoned characters and forgotten storylines. But Walt Disney and his team of artists took this oldest of fairy tales and made it uniquely their own. And that is the Cinderella that is.
Oh,